All right, we are here at my tiny worm bin, and it has been about a month since we were in here last. And today we're going to check on our last big feeding and a couple of feedings that we did in between while we were on the road. And I've got a super special surprise that I'm so excited about. I've got a new creation, but we'll get to that. But first, we're going to kind of dig in here. And, you know, when we were in here, the last time I was in here, we had some coverings and stuff, but the worms have eaten through that. In fact, we had driven up to Pensacola for my brother's retirement ceremony from the Air Force. And while we were there, we fed it a banana peel and some coffee grounds and a coffee filter. And that was all on top, and I don't see any of that. And then about a week later, we fed some lettuce stalks and I think some strawberries. And then we had a couple pieces of watermelon. And then we put some of this shredded cardboard over the different places we had fed. But the worms have done a pretty good job of getting into here and eating through all that top covering. And as I'm kind of going back and forth here, I'm seeing some worms, but I am also seeing a bunch of mites. Now, if you remember from our last video, we had a avocado shell and it was teeming with mites. And that's one of the things I wanted to check in here and see if we got a big mite bloom or if it was just kind of isolated to the avocados. So I'm just going to dig under a little bit. I'm feeling all kinds of hard things. So let's see what those are. Ooh, one of them is, oh my gosh, this might be cinnamon stick from many feedings ago. I'm going to smell it real quick. Well, that was pretty dumb. It just smells like forest floor. It certainly doesn't smell like cinnamon, but I think that's what that is. Wow, I missed that in the migration. But here are some of those avocado shells, and we've got our normal worms in there, but we've also got some mites. So not as bad as it could have been. But let's go ahead and review what we put in here last time. The first thing we did was put in dry shredded cardboard, followed by just a couple of lettuce stalks, an angel cot that we broke open, a cayenne pepper, and a piece of eggplant. That was it. Then we finished off our small feeding with homemade worm chow, spent coffee grounds, and pulverized eggshell grit I make in my magic bullet blender. So not too big of a feeding, and I don't really know if we're going to find any of that in here. So when we feed them again, we're going to go ahead and give them a little bit bigger of a feeding, but check it out. Lots of great worms. So that makes me happy. I really am going to try and get in here every 3 or 4 days and just keep feeding them small amounts. I think that's the way to go with this, and especially the way to go with it because we have been on the road a lot lately and we are still traveling a lot. So I like to be able to take a worm bin and put all the stuff that we use on the road, anything we want to discard or that we would normally recycle that could go in a worm bin, we just pop it in here along with our food scraps. So before we get too much deeper, let's go ahead and head outside for that surprise. All right, we're here at my regular garden compost pile, and I was digging through it and saw some worms, so I'm going to show you how to start a little tiny worm bin for free. This is a container I got at a local Chinese restaurant. I've got some of my shredded cardboard in here that I've dampened, and let's go ahead and dig in. And I've already got a little bit in here. We've got some good worms crawling throughout there, if you can see that right there. So let's just kind of dig some more. I found that they're kind of on the edges, and we'll just dig up and, you know, check it out right there. Little red wiggler right there. I'll just keep going through and get a bunch of worms, and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to start this worm bin. Oh yeah, look at that one right there. Totally awesome. That one right there, I'm not sure if it's a red wiggler or maybe a one of those jumping worms, so I'm going to set that to the side. Oh yeah, that one right there is a great one. Definitely see some other critters that I don't necessarily want in my worm bin. Another really great one right there. See how it's just moving a little bit slowly. It's not jumping around or anything. And it's got that orange tail right there and a kind of bloated clitellum. That's how I know it's a red wiggler. It's a little warmer towards the center, so they're not in there. All right, so I think we've got enough in here to start a little worm bin. So check that out. Yep, we've got some right there. So here we go. This is, I don't even think it's a gallon. I can't read Chinese, but that right there says what it is. And we're just going to put this in here just like that. Make sure we get all the worms that we had. Got all kinds of good compost in there to inoculate them. Now, there's certainly going to be some little critters in here like this little bug. It's like an earwig. Oh, little worm right there. But this isn't going to be something that's going to be in my home. We're just going to kind of keep it on our lanai and make it a backyard lanai worm bin. But I'm going to mix that up right there. I'm going to add some more shredded cardboard, and then I will feed it the next time I feed my tiny worm bin. So check it out. We are here 3 days later, and I cut up a little piece of plastic to cover it up to keep the moisture in it. It's doing a pretty good job. I feel it. It's wet right there. And then we also put in a soiled paper towel that I had soaked, and it still feels moist, so that's good. And as I look inside, I see a whole lot of sticks, and we are going to see a lot of creatures in here because that right there is a snail, which, you know, I'm not going to pull them out. I just want to look around and see what's in here because this came straight out of the compost. And oh yeah, check out that right there. We got a great fat worm. Oh, awesome. So they are alive, and I'm going to try and do a fairly decent job of getting my hand in and out of here. You can see this is a very tiny worm bin. I would say this is probably less than a gallon, and I have way less than that amount of material in here. And I just want to kind of dig around and make sure we've got worms. And look, we've got one right there. Maybe that's the same one. We've got a tinier one here, but they're all going to be compost worms because I found them in my compost. Your ordinary garden worm is not going to be something that wants to be together and bumping into each other like you will see when you have compost worms. So, you know, this bin is completely 100% free because I went to a Chinese restaurant and got this container. Like I said, these worms are completely free. All I had to do was build a compost pile, and I'm putting food scraps in that. So I'm getting these worms for free, and we are going to try and keep this bin going. Now, I'm not going to check in on it often. I mean, I'm really cheating because the executive producer said I can only have 4 worm bins, and this technically makes 5, but we see lots of babies through here, so I am pretty excited. Even a little tiny one right here moving around. Not sure if you could see that, but let's dig just a little bit more because I want to see if it's pooling at the bottom. This is one of the few worm bins that does not have a hole in it, holes at the bottom, and I want to make sure that I'm not going too moist here. Yep, bunch of little ones right under there, some bigger ones here. So we've got a decent worm bin going here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a tiny hole right here, and we're going to put our absolutely tiny feeding because I imagine we may only have about 20 to 50 worms in here.
There was a critter.
What kind of critter?
Like a black crawly thing.
Yeah. All right, real quick. Executive producer said there was a critter in here. And earlier I did see an earwig, so that might be in here. I think when we're off camera, I may play with this a little bit more next week and see if there's any critters in here that I don't want.
Or I don't want.
All right, so check it out. For this feeding, all they're getting is 1 piece of watermelon. That is it. In fact, that is a lot. I'm not even sure that I should put that much in. But since they came from a compost pile, I don't mind too much. I think they're going to be all right. But with a new worm bin, you really don't want to overfeed it. Now, because these came from my compost pile and they're already inoculated, I am going to put in some of our amendments. So I'll start with just a little bit of worm chow, and then I'm going to follow that up with just a little bit of coffee grounds, just like that. And then we'll go in with some pulverized eggshell grit, and we'll put it in right there for them. Now, normally when you start a brand new worm bin with fresh bedding, you aren't going to have a really inoculated situation going in there. So you can hold off on the amendments until you really can find out how much the worms can eat. And with all the worms that I see in here and the microbes that I know are in here, they're not going to have a problem with that watermelon. We're going to check on this in a week. So that is awesome. We have started our new micro worm bin. Now, I will go ahead and feature this occasionally when I'm doing the tiny traveling worm bin, and this one is not going to travel with me, but we will keep checking on this and see how it's doing. Bloop. Man, I'm so excited about that tiny micro worm bin and to show you that you can start a worm bin for absolutely free. It's not how I would start if I've never done a worm bin, but it's one that if you don't want to make a cost and you want to see how it goes, you can give it a try. Really, the way I would start would be to go for a vermi hut, and I did a video on that to show you why, but I'm going to dig in the corners here just to see how things are going. I am seeing a lot of mites just as I look around and I hold still, I can see just lots of movement throughout the castings. So that is something we're going to keep an eye on. Mites are not a problem at all. They usually are an indicator if you see an increased bloom of maybe conditions going a little acidic or maybe an overfed situation, which I know we didn't have in here because they're just not getting as much food as we usually put in, but it is something for me to look at. So mites in your worm bin are a good thing. They're going to help shred up some of the food for the worms. And check this out. This right here is that piece of corn we've been monitoring. Got a couple worms going in and out through where the kernels were, and I'm sure inside there will be some worms. I'm just going to give it a little bit of a push to see, and yep, sure enough, I was able to dig in there. And let me see if I can break it up a little bit more. Not too bad. Again, we've got some mites, and I thought I saw a little worm in there. They usually will hollow out the center first, but we'll just leave that how it is. And we'll come over to this corner right here and bring it towards the front just to make sure we've aerated everything. I was talking about holes in the bottom of bins. This is my other one that doesn't have a hole. All my other bins drain. So for me, it's important that I get to the bottom and just make sure that things aren't pooling. So things are looking good. We have lots of great castings. Moisture level is perfect. I squeeze it, it stays formed, but then it crumbles apart. It's not liquidy. It smells fantastic. It just kind of smells like being in the forest right after it rains, and I love that smell. So let's go ahead and make a little bit of a trough, and we are gonna set up for our feeding. So first we'll go in with some dry shredded cardboard. The food that I'm gonna feed them was previously frozen and is now thawed, and it's gonna go ahead and wet that down. So here's what we had in mind. This right here is just the top of a carrot. That'll go right down there. We'll give them a banana, which is a great food because it's a slow food, this little flesh here, and then the peel itself is a little bit more of a long-term food. It's not necessarily a food scrap that I would feed right away to your first bin on its first 3 feedings or so, but after that, banana peels are great. We've got a lettuce stalk, which this thing looks big and bulky and probably the biggest thing we're gonna put in here, but it'll be gone in about 3 to 4 days. We've got their all-time favorite. We got some watermelon right there, some broccoli, and then looks like some carrots, strawberry talk, and celery and tomatoes. So that right there is a fantastic feeding for 1,000 worms for about 2 weeks. But that's not all. They're gonna get some worm chow, just some expired grains from my pantry, and I think this one is confectioner's sugar and steel cut oats that again I grind up in my Magic Bullet blender. I've got links for all my worm equipment in the description and pinned comment if you want to check those out. I got a worm right on the edge I'm gonna dump in. And then here we go, add in some coffee grounds, just a really good food source for them, lots of nitrogen in it, and it's shredded so finely that they're able to eat it pretty easily. And then next we're gonna go in with some eggshell grit. When I do my time lapses, it always seems like they eat this first. And really, this is a great ecosystem. We've got mites, we've got microbes, and we've got worms, and they're all working together to turn this food into castings and ultimately fertilizer for our garden. Now, believe it or not, I got this bin from a vermicomposting class that my county was putting on through their extension office, and it has gone through about 5 or 6 iterations from starting off to producing castings, and each time I did that, I created a how-to start your own worm bin. So check out this video right here if you want to see how to do that. So we'll just add some more shredded cardboard to the top, and then I'm going to throw on the soiled paper towels right here. And then we'll end with our bubble wrap to keep the moisture in place. So I hope you're having a great day. I hope your worm bins are doing fantastic. So happy vermicomposting, everybody. Take care now.